Now, amid the lockdown, particularly in Sydney, employees in New South Wales who breach public health orders by not allowing their employees to work from home can be issued an on-the-spot fine of $10,000. For his take on the penalties, Joydeep Hor from People Culture and Strategies joining us now live. Joydeep, good to talk to you this morning. So this is obviously unprecedented, but then we shouldn't be surprised because we're in unprecedented times. But talk us through the implications of this then when, so this is obviously encouraging, well not just encouraging, but forcing companies to make sure their employees are working from home.
Yeah, absolutely. And good morning. And this is, you're quite right. It certainly is unprecedented times. And I think that any commentary expressed by me or anyone else on anything to do with government orders or rules and regulations needs to be said with that precursor that no one envies, and I certainly don't envy the Premier of New South Wales or any of our political leaders at this particular point in time. But this particular new rule that has come into effect as of midnight just gone has taken what has been a position that has been reasonably well understood to a whole new extreme. And I think it's not over-exaggerating to say that this is an unheralded interference by a government in matters between an employer and an employee. Now, to say that, as the Public Health Order in New South Wales now does, that employers must require their employees to work from their place of residence is interfering, and there's no other way to describe it, in how an employer goes about conducting its business. It is saying to that employer that what you might regard as necessary, as appropriate, critical for your survival, critical for your welfare of your staff and other stakeholders is secondary, if not tertiary, to us saying that you have to require your people to work from home. Now, there is a small exception to that, which says that if it is not reasonably practicable for that employee to work from home, well, then that's okay. Now, of course, the moment you start introducing words such as reasonably practicable, you're not necessarily assisting employers who have otherwise been told that if they do require their employees to come into an office or a workplace, that they face on-the-spot fines of $10,000. Now, that's a very heavy-handed stick approach that departs massively from what the position has been, and respectfully, I would say should be, which is to be encouraging employers to be sensible, to be putting in place the necessary measures in terms of COVID-safe workplaces and other things, rather than this extraordinarily heavy-handed and draconian measure that will do nothing more than continue to punish employers, particularly here in New South Wales, and with respect, it contradicts a lot of the otherwise stated goodwill towards them.
Yeah, but of course, Joydeep, it comes down to definition. Now, the government has struggled to define what an essential worker is. So potentially this is a big grey area they've got to deal with of how you actually define whether the company needs to have their employees at work or can legitimately operate from home.
Yeah, that's right. And again, it goes back to this term reasonably practicable. And I can postulate any number of scenarios. I can say, all right, well, in an environment where the majority of students or all students are going to be remote learning, if a worker has to attend to the remote learning needs of one or more children in their place of work, many employers would be forming the view, well, with the greatest respect to those employees and without any kind of suggestion of exploitation or wrongdoing on their part, it is unfair to be expecting them to be doing work while they are attending to home learning responsibilities for their children. In those circumstances, an employer will, in all likelihood, be within its rights to say, I'm sorry, but I just can't accept that you can do your work from home in that particular situation. And if that then creates a predicament, and this is my real worry in this, is that the employer response is going to be something like, we're going to force people to take annual leave. We're going to now be taking far more drastic measures as an employer towards our employees. There'll be redundancies, there'll be pay cuts, there'll be a whole heap of other things. And employers will say, well, the government has given me no choice but to do this. Now, I know there may be implications in terms of JobSaver and some of those other employer assistance schemes, but this is the kind of consideration that I just wonder whether this has been properly thought through.
Joydeep, we are hearing anecdotally at least stories of employers forcing their employees to take leave. Is there any evidence that that is actually happening, and what sort of recourse would both parties have here?
Yeah, annual leave and the circumstance in which an employer can direct an employee or a group of employees to take annual leave is something that is comprehensively dealt with in legislation. The Fair Work Act, which applies to 85% of the Australian workforce, says that an employer may direct an employee to take annual leave if it's reasonable to do so, particularly if that employee has an excessive annual leave balance. And there are particular provisions in the legislation that says that an employer can shut down its business. And indeed go down the path of stand downs, as I'm sure that most players in the construction industry in New South Wales would be doing right now. So, but the problem is exercising an employer's rights in that particular manner, as far as the employee is concerned, and more relevantly, the quality of the employment relationship is concerned, is something that is affected outside the scope of pure legal rights and responsibilities. And this is not a pleasant thing for employees to have to be told that they're going to be directed to take their annual leave. So much of this is outside their control. Many of them would be very happy to work. A lot of them would be quite happy to come into their usual place of work. But in the current environment, that's just not something that's going to be entertainable. So these consequences are going to be very damaging to that quality of employment relationship issue.
Joydeep, thanks for joining us from People, Culture and Strategies.
Thanks for having me.